Hi, this is Pat Moorhead, and we are here for another 6-5 podcast. My favorite thing to do during the week, although I do other podcasts, and I think, Dan, you and I did, 6 or 7 this week already in Miami. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, good morning. It's great to be back. 6-5 is live because it's Friday and we do this live. If you're watching it live, thanks for tuning in. If you're not watching it live, well, thanks for watching it later. Yeah, we did 6, and I think I did like 12 or 13 this week.
That's crazy. That's great.
A banger of a week. By the way, I like your new background. I like that. What is that super tall skyscraper behind you? I'm trying to map this.
That was the new Meta building. That's no longer the Meta building that they're subleasing, but it's going to be the tallest building in Austin. I think it's 60-some stories. I'm in my son's room. As you can see, gaming chair, ready to go. But thought I'd flex on the view a little bit. You know, I mean, I got to show off something. Living downtown, I mean, you know, you've got increased crime, homeless. You know, I mean, but it is beautiful at times. So, oh, are you moving ahead? Are you moving ahead on me already?
No, I just figured we'd preview. I figured we'd preview what we're going to talk about today for people. And,
all right.
You know,
hey, if it's the first time you've been on the 6-5, first of all, I'll ask, like, where have you been? Living under a rock? No, we cover 6 topics, 5 to 10 minutes each. A lot of tech analysis and a little bit of news sprinkled in there. We do talk about publicly traded companies as well. And in fact, we're talking about 3 companies' earnings this week. But don't take any of this as investment advice. Go for a professional. Let's jump in. Audience, we have an amazing week of topics. We're talking Intel Xeon workstations. We're talking Qualcomm modem announcements. Nokia and Kyndryl are tying up strategic alliance for wireless. We have Cisco Earnings, Lattice Earnings, and GlobalFoundries Earnings. Let's jump in. Let's hit the Qualcomm X75, X35. I am calling your number, Daniel Newman.
Sorry, I was putting the number on the shirt. I'm jumping in, Coach. I am ready to play. It's a great analogy following the Super Bowl. Yeah, so Qualcomm has had a very, very successful run of unquestionably leading at the premium tier. However, one of the opportunity areas, or you could call it a challenge if you want to be more frank about it, for the company has been playing and competing in that sort of mid-range space, competing along the likes of, say, MediaTek.
Yeah.
And so Qualcomm said, well, they didn't just say. This week, they basically made some announcements of its newest X7 series, 75, and goes along with its X72 5G modem RF system, basically focused on 5G millimeter wave, sub-6, includes the satellite feature, which is pretty cool. I did a pod with the GM Durga Melody on that particular topic. But, you know, incorporating a lot of those kind of advanced features. It's got not only 5G advanced, but it's got the tensor accelerator for 5G. It's got the AI processing power. And in the end, what it really came down to was Qualcomm wanted to come out with a product that says, hey, you know, across the line, it's massive line of partnerships of the US, the global OEMs across China. It says we want to be able to make sure that Qualcomm modems and Qualcomm systems are inside all or as many of the different designs as possible. And so for the company, I fundamentally believe this was we want to clearly define that we have the top premium tier and now we're going to go for the rest of it. This isn't a new series. They've had a 7 series. It just hasn't necessarily been feature rich enough to displace some of the MediaTek based devices in that mid-range tier. And I think that's really what they're coming after here. You know, stronger performance, a lot of weight here going into AI. And of course, you know, Pat, we talk a little bit at times about Skyworks and Qorvo, but one thing that Qualcomm has done extremely well is their 5G RF modem and systems. This is something that I believe they're really leaning into as they're sort of selling this story, is effectively you're getting near ultra premium experiences and they're enabling them for the tier down. And so, Pat, while I'd love to kind of ramble on about it, for me, it's a pretty straightforward shot of news here. It's a good move for the company. There's a lot of market share there, especially outside of the USA, where there's a lot more sales of sort of these mid-range and lower tier smart devices from companies like Samsung, Oppo, Xiaomi, and others. And I think this will be a successful product for Qualcomm to continue to expand its market share.
Yeah, I mean, this is essentially Qualcomm flexing particularly on the modem side, essentially saying, hey, no one can match us on modem. If you need the best, you have to take Qualcomm. And Qualcomm has made an incredible business about that. A couple of quick features. Obviously, it supports release 16, release 17, but it's also ready for 5G advanced, which is revision 18. Some pretty cool use cases. They're doing an AI on the modem RF combination, leveraging tensor acceleration, which is pretty cool. The other thing is the first converged millimeter wave sub-6 and first converged millimeter wave sub-6 transceiver architecture. Essentially means one chip for that. And that means lower PCBs, typically means lower power and less hassle for the ODMs and OEMs. I can't help but to think, Apple, how do you compete with this, right? Apple's been working on a 5G modem for, I think, 4 years, going on 5 years. Where is this thing? You would have expected it to pop up in at least the iPad because it's a little bit easier on devices that don't have voice. You have to deal with less complexity, but where is this thing? And here we have 5G advanced coming up. Is our Apple's modems going to have this special feature and support for release 18? I have no idea. And the X35, just kind of caboosing on you, it's what's called NR Lite, which is RedCap, which is in release 17, and how it goes into these IoT use cases that require lower power and, quite frankly, don't all require millimeter wave. Millimeter wave is important in elements like the industrial IoT when it comes to performance and latency. But when you think about, let's say, 50,000 sensors on a pipeline, it's not necessarily about having the lowest latency. It's about having the lowest power with a sufficient amount of performance. As for folks like Qorvo and Skyworks, I think in particular, Skyworks has shown its ability to work and solve problems, particularly for Apple, related to its RF working with Qualcomm's subsystem. So I'm interested to see what the company aligns on the RF side with the new X75.
That's a good call out too, by the way, on the X35. I missed that, but the company's leaning big time into the IoT space, and so having those specific solutions deserve their own call.
Yeah, totally. Hey, let's move to the next chippery. Intel announced a new workstation chip, and I guess the first thing I'll say is get a little context is workstations are used for design. They're used by programmers. A lot of 3D magic that you see pretty much everywhere is driven by a workstation. Workstation market also has certified software, right? Let's say like Dassault or something like that. That it's not like a PC market where everything should is and expected to run. These are so intertwined into the hardware that they have to be certified. So I think the big news here is this was the latest version of Xeon getting integrated into the workstation line. And every company has choices. Processor companies have choices on how they can attack the market, and Intel really has a dual-pronged approach, which is hit it with a Xeon type of architecture for the highest performance, the highest bandwidth, and then hit it with core architecture, more likely on workloads that aren't certified and don't need the massive amount of I/O, RDIMM, ECC memory, and things like that. I think the biggest differentiator about these new platforms is really I/O. I mean, a gigantic and a gigantic amount of L3 cache, which really helps to get optimal performance for those highest performance workloads. I think in this case, less on core count, because quite frankly, I think AMD, and for that matter, Ampere will bring more cores, but I think this is about IO and bandwidth. You can also get, what I'm super interested to see is how some of Intel's integrated AI features like AMX and BFloat 16 via deep learning boost get used by ISVs out there, because this is an area, as we both know, whether it's on chip or off chip AI, as long as it's integrated into the closely coupled into the processor, can really do some great stuff.
Yeah, you hit a lot of it, Pat. This is a big, I guess there's two things Intel's competing with. Intel's competing with the other names you mentioned, the AMDs and Amperes, but they're also competing with themselves. And by themselves, it's like every generation needs to show meaningful improvements and be driving, reasons to their customers to upgrade their workstations. Right now you're battling cycles. You're battling companies that are slowing down their purchasing cycles. You're battling companies that are hiring less people, less programmers, less developers. Having said that, a lot of those key functions in companies continue to be important despite other maybe lesser important and roles that were harder to define being minimized in bigger companies. So developers still have a big role to play. I think it's worth double clicking on what you said about the accelerator strategy, because that is a big part of the AI story. You're seeing a kind of a continuum of AI on chip to AI through software, and Intel's really leaning into software here. Seeing how that actually drives better performance from the workstations is going to be something that the market's going to want to keep its eye on, and of course its users. As workstations aren't quite gaming, but there is a bit of a cult of these kinds of devices where you want the people using them to swear by them and to become my workstation is better than your workstation types. It's just what's going on. So, the specs look promising. The biggest thing I noticed, though, is the significant generation to generation improvement, which is what the company's really touting. Not to say they're not going to want to compete with AMD and others, but the real guesstimate for me is that people who are already running on Intel workstations will carry over and be looking for their next Intel workstation. Not sure if there's enough here to get the brand switch to drive a switch from one brand to another. Of course, that's what all the companies are doing, is fighting for market share. And the last thing, of course, when I say competing with itself, it's got an aggressive timeline here, Pat. It's saying pre-order February 15th and availability beginning in March. I promise you, everybody in the world is going to be looking to see if those things start shipping in March, because that's what Intel's up against. But promising incremental improvements here.
Yeah, AMD has done a really good job with its Threadripper Pro, and that's what this aligns with. And Threadripper Pro is based on a server part as well. And in fact, when I was at AMD, we came out with the first server-based workstation part called the Athlon FX, and it's kind of been a staple the whole time. But hey, let's move from chippery into some news that I think is coming out right before Mobile World Congress, and that is a tie-up between Nokia and Kyndryl. So what is a carrier equipment company and a service provider up to here?
Yeah, so we'll link the press release in the bottom, because you and I we try to not be so much news, try to be a lot of analysis. But yeah, it is a good question. Why would a large IT infrastructure or service provider and a state-of-the-art leader, as Nokia calls itself, in networking technology, add a 3-year extension and expansion? So this is not a new tie-up. This is an expansion to an existing tie-up to basically focus on delivering the 5G and LTE private wireless experiences in Industry 4.0 to their customers worldwide. And so, interestingly enough, Kyndryl often doesn't get enough credit, because we sometimes give them a bit of a hard time as the company that was slowing the growth of IBM. But the company did serve a very important purpose, and they do some very specialized kinds of systems integration and service providers. We all know that there are these applications, Pat, for gosh, last 2 or 3 years, we've been talking private LTE. We've been talking about, whether that's shipyards or large manufacturing warehouses and big metal buildings and high rises, that having private networks and advanced LTE available is going to be critical, especially when you have large systems, robotics, manufacturing lines, plants, large distributions and logistics centers. And so having the technology, the core technology, coupled with the companies that know how to design, service, and implement is going to be critical. Kyndryl has a big footprint. This isn't a new alliance, by the way. It was actually, I believe it was announced around MWC last year. So it's not something that's been out for a long time, but they've got track record here, Pat. They've got 100 engagements that they're doing with enterprises around the world. They're doing implementations in 24 countries. And they have been able to start to give some customer references, which is always important in terms of how they're helping to solve these private wireless challenges. So they got Dow Chemical, which is a huge industrial company here in the US, that actually did partner, building out their private network for, audio services, video, real-time stream processing. And so this is a sensible tie-up, Pat. One of the things to note, and I think it is really important, is this really is a tie-up that focuses on industry. It is very industrially focused, meaning, big companies have been talking about this Industry 4 transition for years. And Industry 4 requires a robust and reliable connectivity system, and traditional Wi-Fi networks, traditional mobile networks do not cut the mustard. And so basically what Nokia, you cut mustard? Is that even a thing?
I don't know. You just invented it, so it's a thing now.
Have you heard that before? Or did that come out of like my childhood? Anyway, these particular tie-ups are really important to giving the robust and needed connectivity for these industrial environments to actually be able to execute on the promise of Industry 4.0, which, by the way, unlike private 5G and LTE, we've been talking about Industry 4.0 for like a decade. So this is not new. These is really tactical, functional, and how companies are going to move forward in these more industrial, hardened environments.
So I want to focus not on the it's not new. What I appreciated most of all is they gave details about it. A lot of strategic alignments come out there, and there's absolutely no example. And what I appreciated was that the two companies talked about what they're doing for Dow Chemical at a petrochemical processing plant in our beautiful state of Texas, in Freeport. So, they're essentially leveraging connectivity solutions from the two companies for worker safety, remote audio and video collab, and real-time smart chemical facility procedures. So that was the element of reality that I appreciated of this, first of all. And, this is also, by the way, I think a nice mark. North American president of Nokia, Sean McCarthy, came in, and it's nice to see the increased outbound communication and the proof points and case studies that are going on. And I'm sure he had a hand in this as well. I had a chance last month to talk to Kyndryl Chairman and CEO Martin Schroeder about what the company is doing and what his strategy is. And Kyndryl is definitely hitting in the right growth elements. There is a carrier telco transition that's going on from from fixed function, 8 different architectures to virtualized solutions out there, essentially converting themselves into mini hyperscaler data centers. And then you add that to all the action on the edge, where all the data is being created and where all the transactions are actually happening, and the need to have a more intelligent network for the industrial IoT. I'm pretty excited about this tie-up, and I'm going to be actually talking to both companies today to get even more information. So, hey, let's move to earnings time. Dan, I know you love earnings. Earnings are the absolute purifier. Uh-oh, sorry about that. We keep going back and forth. That's right. You're the producer for this.
Don't be mad when I do my job.
No, I'm sorry. I keep stepping on your toes here. But man, Cisco, pretty freaking rocking about how they did. So first of all, I always like to net it out. Beat, raise, right? And it doesn't get any better than that. And the great part about the beat, that the beats were in line with what it had done the previous 3 quarters. So it wasn't some declining beat. Okay. And I do give credit for that. And, you know, it's funny, during the pandemic, if you remember, Cisco's CEO, Chuck Robbins, always talking about durable demand, right? And that was the big question, right? Is were people double ordering, right? After the pandemic, were they going to keep those orders in? And you know what? Here we go. I mean, second highest revenue quarter ever, record net income, record EPS, record cash. And I was asked by a couple journalists and folks in investment industry, hey, do you think this forecast, this raise is durable? And all I have to do is look at that $32 billion in RPOs, which indicates to me a super heavy backlog. So this was really about networks. Okay. Networks were rocking it, up 14%, really driven by Catalyst 9K and 8K. Mass infrastructure was down a little bit. Collab was way down. But I do want to, and by the way, collab being way down, totally get it, right? People are going back to work. I wouldn't expect it to be a barn burner. Tough compares as well to previous quarters when we were all locked inside. I do want to talk a little bit about software, though, right? Software revenue and software revenue subscriptions were both up double digit, which I think too many people forget and lump in Cisco as, you know, just an infrastructure company. But when you look at the type of software they have, like security and observability, these are cutting edge capabilities that work in the hybrid multi-cloud. And you know, I can't shut up about fabrics in the hybrid multi-cloud, but that is the future. You know, whether it's Cloudera for data fabric, you know, Cisco maybe for networking fabric, or maybe VMware, right, for that. And then you've got the fabrics for application with the VMwares and the Red Hats. But, you know, company has a good future, and I love to see this durable demand. People are still buying, Dan, and we should all be pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Pat. You know, I was worried. I'm not going to lie. I was worried heading into earnings on how the OEMs would do. We kind of keep hearing about the slowdown. We keep hearing about the recession. We keep hearing about how tech is going to get hammered. But then I remembered I'd already called this. And I was like, wow, I'm really smart. No. Well, yes. But I already said what's old is new. And I know that's not popular, but I went on Market Watch 6 months ago. I called out exactly companies like Cisco, HPE, Dell, infrastructure. Not
Victory Lap. Victory Lap. You know, we need
I said those parts of the business were going to do well.
Button,
and I said that to be clear, because companies are going to be doubling down on existing infrastructure. They're going to be sharpening it up. They're going to be prepping it for utilization. They're going to be increasing things like data transport, analytics tools. They're going to be trying to maximize software investments. They want to implement AI tools. You can't do it without a backbone. All this stuff requires data to be moved around. Guess what moves data around? You need networking. Guess who does networking? Cisco. And so, you know, sometimes you just got to kind of step back from the pundits and go, if you can't discern the fact that a slowdown in PC sales and a slowdown in infrastructure are not interdependent, there is no dependency between these two things. While companies are going to be busy slowing down maybe subscriptions to SaaS services and maybe buying less PCs and not as many mobile devices, what they're not going to be slowing down is figuring out ways to implement the data that their companies have meaningfully to get better outputs. And Pat, you and I spent some time over at Cloudera this week, you know, talking to them. And one of the things I think that companies like Cisco are going to be really leaning into is the data layer.
Yeah.
and even getting into more data tools. And Cisco has already shown some of their ambition there, big observability moves within the company, what they're doing, Thousand Eyes and AppD. Of course, you've got the, they almost bought Splunk. If it says something about where they're directionally heading, and don't get me wrong, that was very close to happening. So you look across the business and you go, it's really, really healthy. You called out the backlog. That was a great call. It was good to see, by the way, that if you're kind of looking at the recessionary impacts, well, you know what, they grew in every region. And in fact, in the US, they grew the fastest. So that's another good indicator. You're seeing strength across most of the business units. Probably the one thing that continues to worry me a little bit is the collaboration slowdown. And mostly it only worries me because Cisco's collab never really saw the boost the other saw. So it was always a more steady sort of process throughout the
pandemic. It is the market share leader, though. So it is the market share leader for enterprise. So maybe you're talking large numbers.
And as people look at that, by the way, and I want to be very clear, they have a huge collaboration business, but there is a big chunk of that that's enterprise calling and contact center. It's not all. It's not. So what I'm saying is, you're kind of
that's fair. I know what you're saying.
Teams, Zoom, and everyone's doing a little different thing. It's kind of like all the companies calling out their cloud market share, but putting different things into their cloud numbers.
Fair.
The parts of the business, and I guess I'll leave it here besides networking, is I love Cisco as a security play. I absolutely love the company. I love security right now. I think this is an area that's going to continue to grow and expand. Companies cannot look away from security. Can't look away from networking because you can't do any of the stuff with data, but you also need to secure your perimeters. You need to secure your edges. You need to secure your devices, and you need to do it at the infrastructure level, and then you're going to need to do it all the way out. And Cisco has a pretty significant portfolio to handle that. I also like their direction in software. It's been steady, single digit, usually high single digit growth, but that part of the business was kind of criticized for a long time. Is there enough software and ARR opportunity? And those numbers have continued to steadily go up. So it's a little bit of a love fest here, Pat. It's a little bit of a love fest, but frankly,
you got to call it, man. I mean, I don't feel bad because
Cisco deserves it. They deserve it.
Yeah, exactly.
This time, sometimes we got to be tough love, and this time it's just straight up hugs and love. The good stuff. So
yeah. So hey, let's move to another success story here from an earnings point of view, and that is Lattice. Dan, what does Mr. Jim Anderson have to say here?
Pat, this is another slam dunk. Just a great result. I'm going to pull up just pulling up one thing I wanted to look at here, but look, the company overall just had a tremendously strong year, and not just a strong year in this quarter. They had a strong overall full year performance, which they were able to announce with this particular set of earnings. Q4, they showed nice growth. I think it was, Pat, you said this in the last one, beat, raise, raise. This was a beat, and a raise. The company had growth in every area outside of its consumer business. And it had some really strong growth in a number of its areas. I believe for Q4, 40% comms. It was down significantly there. I'm just trying to get through my notes real quick. Sorry about that. But they had IoT, automotive, manufacturing, all saw significant upside. As we've said over the last few quarters, Pat, the company's probably going to have the most limitation in the consumer, but you got to be really positive about Lattice because that's a really small percentage of its business. You also have to be really excited about the company's roadmap because the roadmap, with what they're doing with Nexus, the next generation, and then heading into Avant is driving driving their business into the middle of the market. So they were kind of always at that entry point of the market. And now they're driving up market. And, when I talk to their executives, and I think you and I both do each quarter around earnings time, the thing that comes to the attention is where do they get their growth from? They had that kind of captive audience. Well, they saw their TAM jump from, was it 3 to 6 billion with the launch of Avant. So you have a company now that's growing in the mid 20% against a tough macro. They're taking market share. They're launching new products. They're diversifying into markets that essentially are more recession resistant than the consumer space. You know, you got ORAN, you got factory, you got cybersecurity, you got low power for edge and vision applications. So I'm really liking the company. And the other thing, Pat, is, and again, I'm doing some of the numbers on memory here, but they're expanding margin, which means they're doing all this while actually improving the profitability of the company. This goes 100% against all the macro and all the factors that we're hearing from chip makers. But the bottom line is, and I've used this quote a few times, they have a really captive market at the low end, and they're market taking up the stack. They've got strong commitments for their Avant line. I see their numbers, Pat, and I just like, there's not very much to criticize here. And by the way, I'm okay with that. And you're muted, but I see you saying something.
Yeah, I'm talking about Love Fest, man. But
dude, I was scanning my notes trying to find what I'm not happy about, because I know I was like looking for like, what did I not like about the result? And frankly, there isn't much. I mean, even their guide was incredibly bullish right now. So I mean, I don't know what to say.
I love listen, what I love is they show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 quarters in most of their crawl charts. And whether it's revenue dollars, gross margin percent, operating profit percent, earnings per share, it's all up. And it is funny. I'd love to be able to criticize, find something on here, but it is tough. So Dan, we always joke about you pretty much sucking the oxygen, or one of us sucking the oxygen out of a conversation. You pretty much hit everything.
Sorry about that. I was Googling. And by the way,
stocks up
from memory.
Stocks up 10%. Would you like your medal now or later?
No, I lost my notes. So usually I have something in front of me. I had to do this all from.
Look at you. I'm very impressed. Yeah, I left my memory on the table when the internet was created in the browser. So I don't remember any of this stuff. No, listen. So great 12. I mean, 12 quarters of greatness at least. And they haven't even hit Avant yet, which doubles their SAM, and they'll have a lot of room. And, you know, Dan, you and I, we research AI a lot at multiple places in the data center, but also in the edge. You know, imagine when you can attach, you know, generative AI in the cloud to generative AI or, you know, standard machine learning on the edge. I think it's just going to be absolutely crazy. And one of the things that Lattice has done is they've invested so much into certain software stacks. You know, you talked about ORAN, talk about machine learning and the industrial IoT. Heck, they're in PCs now to improve the experience of the built-in camera into notebooks for companies like Lenovo. So let's move forward. I think we've squeezed this for about all we can. Let's move on to the next chip earnings, and that is GlobalFoundries. So you know how it is, Dan. I mean, they crushed it. Good guide. Beat revenue by 1.38%. They beat expectations on EPS by almost 9%. So pretty giant showing here. Increased revenue by 23%. And by the way, this is a great explanation. I explained this to the folks on CNBC Asia last night out of Singapore. I was talking about applied materials, and it's really easy to get sucked into, you know, look at the memory market or storage market collapsing and saying, hey, the chip market's down, or looking at NVIDIA or Intel's showing and feeling like the entire market. But that's just not the case, right? Like we saw from Lattice, and I think what we're seeing in certain areas like communications and infrastructure. right? We talked about Kyndryl and Nokia. Automotive and the industrial IoT are all banging. Yes, smartphones are down. PCs are down freaking big time, right? But there are certain areas that keep on moving. Heck, all that Cisco networking gear, guess what? Full of chips. So getting back to GlobalFoundries, they are a reflection of many of these growth markets. So where do they grow the most year over year? Big growth in communications and infrastructure, automotive, and industrial designs, with smaller declines in what they call smart mobile devices. And I was thinking, wait a second, why aren't they getting hammered in smartphones? It's not just smartphones; it's smart devices. So, and what GlobalFoundries does is they do a lot of the RF that's behind a communication system. And oh, by the way, that's a market that didn't go down like the smartphone market. So people shouldn't confuse smartphones with GlobalFoundries smart mobile devices. Probably one of the biggest announcements of the quarter, Dan, I think you and I, we may have written about it. I know we tweeted about it, was a tie-up with GM. Car companies used to not have direct relationships with chip makers or the foundries that they were fabbed in. And I think we've seen, car companies not able to ship a $75,000 car because you can't get a $1 analog part. And these car companies are wising up. And the latest one is GM, who did a long-term agreement to secure capacity in, New York fab in upstate New York. First of a kind agreement, which brings some heat here to the U.S. Hey, good for the country, good for the economy, good for GlobalFoundries.
Yeah, it was a strong quarter, Pat, and a very, very good news moment for GlobalFoundries to be able to make that announcement. Having had the chance to speak with them last week ahead of the news, I immediately said they're really taking advantage. We did this show last week. Click into our last show if you want our full dive on the GM news. But I basically said, it's in this perfect moment of this perfect inflection for companies to really stand up and say, hey, we're manufacturing here in the U.S. In terms of its earnings, 23% year on year. That's very good. But maybe more importantly, record gross margin and record net income in a market environment that we're in right now. That matters maybe more than revenue. I think a lot of times for companies that are more established companies, people are looking for, can they put off cash flow? So FCF is the word of the day. Are you creating free cash flow? People care about that. The company continues to be ambitious, beyond what it's doing. I believe it made an acquisition of a part of Renesas. Is that how you say it? Renesas on their non-volatile resistive RAM technology. And that's going to help them in what they're doing in IoT.
Our RAM, baby. That's right.
And then they also did get some funding, not a big deal, but it was announced as part of their earnings release related to advanced innovation and production of next generation GaN chips in Vermont, another place that GlobalFoundries is manufacturing. So diversified set of revenues, Pat. I mean, you look across end markets, they have 6. They are heavily tied to smart mobile, but they are also one of those companies that is manufacturing those really hard. So when you and I make references to those 38-cent chips that nobody could get, that was stopping entire manufacturing, they're part of that. They're part of that edge of the process. So, GlobalFoundries has a really important role to play. And the company continues to show strong results, making the right partnerships, playing in the right market spaces, and doing well. Again, this week's Lattice and GlobalFoundries, while semis have been a little bit under pressure, these companies seem to be, what did Jay-Z say? They're brushing the dirt off their shoulder, and they're just getting on with it.
Good stuff, man. I thought
I even made cultural references. How about cultural references, Pat?
Oh, I mean, listen, you're a cultural dude. I mean, you've got
a couple more episodes, and I'm going to be Seth MacFarlane. This is going to be the Family Guy.
All right, Dan, you're a funny guy. Good show. Had a lot of fun. Literally my favorite hour of the week regardless of what happened, things that happened. Actually, pretty good week though. I mean, Miami was good. We did a sales kickoff at Cloudera, cranked out some videos, did some advisory work with the C team there. It was good. Good day. I don't think we stepped. I didn't actually see the beach once. That's okay.
Were we on the beach? I don't even know. Were we near the beach?
I think we were. I think we were.
I think my room was looking at a parking lot.
Oh, my room was definitely looking at a parking lot. But okay. If you hover over on Google Maps, the hotel was actually on the beach. So, anyways, Dan, fun stuff. What's coming up? I mean, I am getting ready to pack to get on the road for Mobile World Congress. I will officially say it's the least favorite show of mine, not because I don't love Spain, but just because it's so hard to get around, because ultimately somebody goes on strike, whether it's the rail strike, taxi cabs, Uber, nope. Bus, yeah, sometimes they go on strike too. So getting in and out of there from the Fira to the hotel. Now, what I did, my cheat code is my hotel is a block away from the Fira. We're going to see how that works out. As long as I can get my ham and cheese and red wine, I'm going to be happy as a clam.
I look forward to seeing you there, buddy. What are we doing? 19 videos and a whole lot. I think
so. That was great. Yeah, the 6.5 is going to be there. Dan and Pat show. And I'm excited to do these. I mean, a lot of good customer videos and interviews that we're going to be doing. That's what I'm the most excited about.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it too. And by the way, I think we have a summit coming up too.
We do, that little summit, 4th annual summit coming up. Since you're the memory guy, what day is it in June? You remember?
June 7 to 9?
Yeah.
Like that? Is that right?
I think it is. Yeah, we'd love for you to tune in. And if you are a technology vendor out there, we would love to have you. So yeah, June 8th. There we go. Thank you.
That email from Connor Kenyon from the beach.
I know. Look at that.
A sales overlord and
exactly.
beach front extraordinaire.
Yeah. Hey, so we want to thank everybody for tuning in. Hope you liked the show. If you have any complaints, you know where to find Daniel. If you love the show, you know where to find me on social. But we really do appreciate you. If you like what you heard or like what you saw or both, hit that subscribe button. We'd love to chat with you every week. So have a super week. Stay warm. We really appreciate you. Take care.